Hey, Nick, thanks for joining us. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. So my name is Nick. I live in Orlando now, currently director of marketplace at a Series A health tech company called Healthy. Been in the professional world now for, about 6.5 years. Started out as a just SDR and kind of worked my way through a couple of different types of sales roles, and now in almost like a tech partnerships role.
Well, it didn't start there. You were in marketing.
Yeah, that is true. I had an interesting
What went
transition.
wrong?
I had an interesting transition from college to the professional world. I was always into startups, and so I did a student startup at the University of Akron. And when I graduated, I had a really tough job tough time finding a job in Ohio. Midwest companies really like to see the classical professional internship. Wasn't too keen on a student startup, and so when I graduated, worked for this digital marketing in a digital marketing role for a luxury skincare startup. It was three of us. It was going okay. But one of my mentors at Akron came to me and said, "Hey, are you learning everything you want to in this role?" And I was like, "Not really." And I had some sales experience doing door-to-door energy sales. And so when he offered me a SDR role down in Orlando and I was living in freezing Akron, Ohio, I kind of jumped on it, and 3 weeks later moved to Florida, sold my car to afford my first month's rent, and thankfully things improved from there.
Yeah. How'd you like it the first year?
Down in Florida, it was tough because I knew nobody. And Josh Kalkanis, he's in sales now. He worked at Mend with me, and so he quickly became one of my best friends. And I joined that company as employee 15, like three SDRs. We all started on the same exact day. Hired the predictable revenue team to come out and kind of train us on the Aaron Ross model. Did outbound for 4 months. Kind of like, I guess, was leading that team of the three of us figuring out the predictable revenue model, and then moved over to inbound, kind of out of a need. We got so many inbound requests that our AEs couldn't properly like qualify all of them. So I kind of became that like key qualifier, built out an inbound sales playbook, just kind of hand in hand with the CEO, because there's 20 of us in the company then. And did inbound for 8 months, and I loved inbound. And I think if you ask anybody, they'd rather do inbound than outbound. So it was a great, first 8, 9 months getting into sales. And then it was, inbound picked up so much, we needed another AE to take on some leads. And so I went from the inbound SDR to kind of like SMB AE for a bit.
Yeah. How'd you like that? Was that better because you had more control or?
Yeah, when I joined this company, I couldn't tell you the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. I knew so little about just the healthcare world in general. And it had probably been several years since I saw a primary care doc. And so I actually found it incredibly useful doing all of those inbound calls and being an SMB AE, because the primary person I was talking to was the end user. Like, they were the decision maker, but also the person who's actually going to be using our platform, to run their practice every day. And I think it actually really helped me as I got into much bigger deals, because even though I was talking to an ops person or something, I knew exactly how they were thinking for the people under them are going to use the platform.
And don't you think it's smarter to have people start with inbound as SDRs versus starting with cold outbound? Or maybe start with list building or even
That's a that's a really good question. The I think it almost depends on what industry you're playing in, because what I found was it was easier for us to start folks on outbound, because just to get a decision maker to the next call, where maybe you have an AE with you, or even the AE is taking it, you didn't need as much healthcare experience as it is when we got inbound requests, whether it was the provider themselves or someone kind of running the healthcare org. They had a lot of very deep industry domain qualifying questions
Oh, okay, I see.
that
Yeah.
an SDR would just fumble through, unless it wasn't your first healthcare job you might be able to get through. I think that's kind of the difference with like if you're a salesperson selling a sales tool, totally like start out, doing list building, doing outbound, doing inbound first, get used to it, and then go after the tougher stuff on outbound. We almost use outbound more as like the training tool to get you to inbound.
Yeah, you make a good argument there because I work with people solely on cold outbound, and they have a hard time understanding how different it is than inbound. Because inbound, they're already aware of the problem. There's
Mm-hmm.
already curiosity. And it's kind of
And
more about how's it work? How's it different? How much does it cost? Who else is using it?
yeah, that's why I'm actually really glad I had a marketing degree going into sales because you're right. You're at a totally different part of that buyer journey when you're doing inbound versus outbound. Like
Yes.
outbound, you're trying to create that needs awareness. Inbound, you get to skip all of that.
Yeah. It's like you have no idea where they're at. They could be quite aware of it or have zero interest or need for it.
And that's one of like the such complex things about healthcare was when we were doing this in 2018 before COVID and we were selling virtual care technology, the laws in every state were different as to whether a provider could get paid by insurance for doing virtual visits. And so in outbound and even half the inbound calls, like they wanted me to really be their lawyer and be like, can I get paid for this? And we really had to be that type of expert. So it wasn't even like, needs awareness of the solution. It was needs awareness of like the regulatory pieces of can I even try this?
And what helped you get good at being an AE? What were some of the key milestones?
Yeah, my first several months, I would actually sit in my buddy Josh's office for like a couple hours a day,
Yeah.
right? Because I had a lot of time where I'm following up on emails, sending out contracts, trying to create my own leads. I could do all that on my computer while I'm next to him and he's on calls, and I can just kind of listen to him go through his talk tracks and how he was able to handle different objections. And so that was super helpful to me just to have that more kind of senior AE kind of guide me into being an AE. And the next thing that I really focused on was the demo. I'm a salesperson that's not afraid to admit I hate the whole negotiation process, but I know I can kill a demo. And so I spent a lot of time with really our entire AE team, and we had a weird sales leadership, went through a bunch of VPs of sales, just kind of fine tuning that. And I ended up taking our demo from like a 45, 50-minute screen share down to most of my demos were like 15 to 25 minutes, just keeping it super straight to the point. Like, what is your primary pain point you're trying to solve? And like, great, I'm done. Like, if you want to see other stuff, we can go into all that, but I'm not trying to show you everything. This isn't show and tell.
And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people give it to a sales engineer to give the demo, and they just go and go like a freight train.
Yeah, that was the I think the benefit, honestly, of starting my sales career in a startup. I've had friends who have gone into, the big companies into sales, and they are all about the sales process, and they have somebody else doing the demos for them. And I think back to my point on doing demos for SMB directly to the end users, that's a huge benefit when you are the salesperson and you know their exact workflows, like their pain points. And so I was really glad that I was doing all my demos myself.
Yeah. And I think you have a good point. Show them, problem solution, and then take it where they want to go.
Yeah, or then you kind of sprinkle in like the magical moments of like the little tiny details the end users love that might not be exactly what they're looking to solve, but it might be in the back of their mind of, oh, that's actually, a big plus on top of you already solving it. And maybe that's what wins you over the competitor because there's probably a competitor that solves their basic pain point similarly, but those kind of like magical things you can sprinkle on top might win like their emotional side to get you the deal.
And where do deals typically stall or get stuck or start over?
Yeah, good question. So during COVID, it was interesting because it went from like the whole country kind of, has all these different laws as to whether they can use telehealth to like, congrats, you can do whatever you want because of COVID. And so what ended up happening was we went from very specific customer types in our ICP to it exploded. And one of the last deals that I won in that role was with a health system where It stalled in a demo period of about 2.5 months. Not a literal stall, but it's because I think I did 25 to 30 demos. In the enterprise organization,
Yeah.
you're talking to a health system that has dozens of different departments. So whoever's leading the gastro department, mental health, ER, they all want this platform to work for them. And so like talking about, bringing a bunch of stakeholders to the table and needing a lot of buy-in, I always found the demo stage was huge for us. And then the other piece is we were the bolt-on. If you're a healthcare organization, you're using an electronic health record. When you walk into the doctor's office, you see them putting their notes in the computer. That's the EHR. Because we were a bolt-on, we needed the data from our two platforms to sync. And some EHRs work great with third-party tools, others don't. And like that is a straight up deal breaker once you get to large organizations. And so even if the demo was great, the first question is always like, great, can this integrate with my EHR? And then you're bringing in like, two different technical companies to come talk together. And sometimes you're stealing business from the EHR because they might actually have their own solution that they can compete with you. And that's like a big conflict you're trying to solve there.
Yeah. So if they had one that already has a competitor product, you're basically inviting them in, giving them a heads up that they're buying something else.
And we had a deal with a org out west where their EHR did have a competitive product. The EHR company sent their executives out to this customer to try to like win them over on their product, say, oh, this company's not going to work. Thankfully, we won that deal, but it was a mess.
Yeah. Did that happen often where they become aware of it and then all of a sudden they end run you and
Not really. I think that was a unique case because this was a flagship customer for this EHR. Oftentimes, the contract value for the basic EHR is so much higher than just the virtual care platform.
it's
And
just
the
an
EHR
add-on?
contracts could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and virtual care contracts were much smaller dollar size. So it wasn't like they were trying to fight tooth and nail most of the time.
And what makes a great rep in this space?
Yeah, I think it's really knowing healthcare. And that's where I think being that SMB account executive and learning everything about the regulations, thinking of this point of view as when I'm a patient, what do I actually do during that whole process? And then where does the staff get involved, the nurse, the provider, then it goes back to the nurse and you leave all of this. And I would always get complimented by the people that I'm demoing to and being like, you actually know healthcare. Like you're not a salesperson. Like you could come into our organization and be the person that implements this tool for us. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how I treated sales, was almost like I'm acting like your implementation consultant during the sales process because it's all about that transfer of ownership. Can you see yourself using this product as I'm demoing it? And I see a lot of people try to come into healthcare with no domain knowledge and really get tripped up, not on sales stuff. Anybody can learn sales tactics, but you actually have to go learn the healthcare side to be able to talk to these people who, they went to school for 15 years just to be a doctor. You've got to put some of that type of domain work in.
Yeah. So you get you had to know the product the way a user would know the product.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I always think it's funny seeing people on LinkedIn that they're a salesperson using a sales tool to sell to other sales people. And I'm like, that's the easiest sales job in the world. Like you are the end user of your own product. When you do not live the industry that you sell, it's like a second job just to keep up with that industry.
It is. And what they typically do is have a sales engineer who's or a domain expert or whatever come in, and that's okay, but you lose context.
Mm-hmm.
They now look at that person as the knowledge base, not you.
Yeah, and I think from a relationship standpoint, that makes the sales process a lot harder because they know that you were there to get the deal won, and somebody else is here to actually help me be successful with this product.
Yeah.
And when you make that one person, it's a much more, I don't want to say like honest sale, but the intentions are like, I really want to solve your problem here.
And that's a big difference.
Mm.
as opposed to somebody who's just going through their KPIs.
Right.
And how about SMB versus enterprise? Which one did you like better?
Definitely enterprise. I think I got to a point where, even though I loved the demo part of the sales process, it gets really boring too. Like once you know your product's just in and out, it's so repetitive. And really, enterprise sales is project management. Like that's what it is. It's not so much the negotiations piece. Like to an enterprise customer, plus or minus 10% on a contract value,
It's not
it
that many.
matters sometimes, but like most of the time, if they picked you, they picked you. And I really enjoyed the project management side of enterprise sales, knowing who my champion is on the other side. And, you know, I led a RFP process with this health system up in the Northeast. And there was this guy, I'm just going to say Chris was his name. He was my point of contact. And I think I looked in my cell phone one day. We talked every single day for about 110 days. And that's the piece of enterprise sales where you really create that relationship with somebody. And then it's great. That one deal was half of my annual quota. And it took me 5 months to sign, but it was a 4-year deal, $500,000 a year. And I was like, great, this is what I want to be doing all day long, not do a, $5,000 deal. And I got to do that 100 times just to get the value of this.
And that's it. And people tend to think that, enterprise sales is just a bigger sale. No, it's much more like project management, mapping it out, understanding the steps, keeping everybody on the same page, keeping the momentum going. It's a lot more fun.
It is. And I think the difference between SMB and enterprise, the sales cycle can often be so short in SMB that you're there to see how much you can meet their needs. In the enterprise world, when your sales cycle is that much longer and you're getting to know these people over a longer period of time, you're able to be more consultative and can actually say no a lot more as a salesperson. And you often find yourself answering questions in a way that's like, I get why you're asking me that question, but I've done this with dozens or hundreds of organizations. You're going to be much more successful if you use our product in this way. And when you actually start to tell them how to use your product in a way that's better for them based off of credibility, that's so much more fun as a salesperson.
Yeah. And enterprise isn't about, number of times you called or subject line or call to action or all these gimmicky things
Right.
that people think is selling. In SMB, I think you made the right point. The 5K, you got to do 100 of them,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a lot of work.
And when you have
And
to do that much, the sales tactics matter so much more because your sales velocity, you've got to go
has
through.
to.
But like you said, in the enterprise world, look, I've talked to you 30 days in a row. I don't need to ask you, hey, you want to get a meeting on the calendar, to meet that, sales manager ask. I probably don't need to do that.
Yeah. And what do you see people doing wrong in your space? Either competitors or people you've worked with in the past or
That's a really good question. What do people do wrong? I now that I'm in a role where I have a couple people under me, I have a bit of a budget for my department and I'm looking at buying tools. There is such an emphasis on the sales tactics, like we just talked about, that they forget about the relationship aspect. And also, like, I am a salesperson buying from you. I get what you are trying to do to me right now. So just like treat me like another person. I'm not a buyer. You're not a seller. We're both humans. We get the psychological tricks. And that's really what sales should be about. It's one human trying to help another human. Like you're going to make me so frustrated if you email me 5 days in a row. And literally today, I got an email from someone I talked to 6 months ago, and the email was like 5 words, and it was like, final follow up. Let me know. I'm like, I'm not
oh, the
responding
breakup
to that.
email. Wow.
Yeah, like,
Well, that's it. Because I always have the saying, if you people treat you the way you act, and if you
mm,
act like a salesperson, you'll get treated like one. And you don't act that way to your enterprise clients or any of your clients because you don't want to be treated that way.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the consultative piece comes into play, and also the industry expertise. And I think that's where the people that have gotten platforms like LinkedIn right, they're not talking about how great they are in sales on LinkedIn. They're actually sharing like, healthcare expertise or whatever industry that they are in that makes them look more credible to actually know how their product can help you. And I think that's where people get it wrong, where I've been on calls with some of the gurus on LinkedIn because they happen to be the salesperson that responds to my inbound request. And it's like, camera's not turned on, they're super monotone, they go through some basic qualifying questions, and it's like they can't wait to get off the call. And it's like, okay, you really enjoy social media, you're not actually like an amazing salesperson.
Right, because everyone thinks it's activity or it's the brand in a lot of
Mm.
cases. But what do you want from them? You want, how do you use it? How do other people use it? What am I missing? How's it different? What's it like the first 90 days?
And I'm in the middle of implementing a tool right now, and that's our interaction with their team every single day. It's they're showing me how their other customers have implemented this tool. I think they've got a flagship customer where like they're allowed to show me like the back end of their portal and how they set it up. And like that's why they won this from me. Like I know one or two other tools could do this, but you're actually going to make me successful with this 90 days from now. And that's why I'm buying you.
Yeah, great. And what do you think wish you did earlier? Because that, you come
Yeah,
in with this SDR, you're right out of college, you're probably starving.
pretty much. I think when you are an SDR and you're an SMB account executive, we already talked about it could take you 100 deals to get to, one enterprise deal. And when you have that mindset as an SMB AE or as a SDR, it's every lead is valuable. You often forget to say no to save your own time. And that's what I learned as I went from an SMB to an enterprise AE. There will be people that will waste your time. There are activities that are low value. And the more you start to say no, the more you're actually going to end up closing more over less deals because you're focusing on the deals with the highest likelihood to close. It's like that whole cliche of like 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. It's so true for a salesperson. 80% of the ARR you close will come from 20% of your leads.
That's it. And, because I was doing this experiment with a couple of reps, it's like, okay, take the deals that closed, and then how much time, your time as an individual rep, did it take to close those deals? And it's probably like 30% of their year. So three-thirds of their year was spent on things that didn't help close those deals. There's a lot of room.
Yeah, and that's what I think I see in startups a lot, this thing of like every deal matters. And no, it doesn't, because if if the customer acquisition cost on an SMB or mid-market customer is so big because you say every deal matters and your mid-market rep has a 10-month sales cycle and now the CAC is going to be 4 or 5 years to return, that deal is not worth it.
Yeah, because not everyone's a perfect match or a great match.
Yep.
And if you're dealing with somebody who's indecisive or combative, or you're getting the sense that they can't make a decision, back burner them. You don't have to delete them or ignore them. Just put them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll come back.
Right. We used to always say that, they always come back. Sometimes we always found we were their second or third platform that they used because we were a little more complex. They often went with somebody simpler. But, the people that are loud in the sales process are loud as customers. And so not only are you now talking about CAC, but you're talking about the pain on customer success, the product and engineering demands that they have. And those are not customers that you want to keep around very long.
We don't talk about that much, but a bad customer, a bad business costs a whole lot more than you get.
And I think that's where, you're starting to see more conversations on salespeople's commission structures actually taking some weight into the first, 12 months of them being a customer or so on. And I think that's totally fair because if you are a salesperson, like, yes, you're probably money motivated, you're there to close deals, but salespeople are the life of the business. And so, if the churn at the company is super high, there's a level that, yeah, like that's the customer success team's fault. But there's probably a lot of variables that means that's also the sales team's fault.
It is. Yeah, because I've always regretted it. I've fell into a trap a couple of times where you're like, oh, the product's a pretty good match, but not a great match, and they're really annoying to work with. And I'm gonna have to live with them after they buy.
Yeah.
See, that's the difference between, SaaS sales and like what on-prem used to be, is that SaaS, you have to live with them. You have to earn that renewal. Enterprise, you have to just earn the maintenance.
Yeah, and that's the it's interesting to see how different SaaS companies, play out where reps start and end. And like on prem, like you mentioned, if you're a territory sales rep, you're closing them, but you're also following up with them, the account management, the upsells, where I think you see a lot more problems in SaaS because there's so many reps that are only responsible for getting the contract signed. Then they pass it off to implementation, to customer success, and they're like, great, I'm getting paid, your job now.
Right. And customer success is going to prioritize on likelihood to expand or renew.
Yep.
So it becomes a self-fulfilling problem because the customer is going to be more of a pain in the butt because they're not getting the help they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And are you hiring salespeople now? Are you a leader? Is that true?
Yeah, so in my current role as director of marketplace, now I'm on the side where we are the EHR company. And so we have a lot of companies that want to integrate with us. And so I run our partnerships of all these third-party companies that work with us. And so now under me, I've got some partnership success managers where we're looking at acquiring new partners. How do we manage the co-marketing and co-selling with existing partners?
And why'd you choose to do that as opposed to staying an AE?
Yeah, I actually really liked what we just talked about and being able to keep that relationship. And so as I'm looking at acquiring partners, it's thinking about how can I bring value to the partner, but also because it's a product partnership, how am I bringing value to the customer through this? And so there's an additional stakeholder to this process that then, because it's the partnership, the co-marketing and co-selling, I'm responsible for keeping this partner slash customer happy ongoing. It's a much less transactional thing. And that's why I moved into it, because the KPIs are a bit less stressful than just like, great, you were 150% of quota in Q3, but you're 75% in Q4. So we're going to put you on a PIP. And it's like, are you kidding me? And like a salesperson, your value is so quarter to quarter or month to month, where partnerships, it's, year plus long projects that are going on.
Cool. Hey, Nick, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
The best places to follow me are probably LinkedIn and Twitter. Advantage of my last name is all my handles are just Nick Narrell, so that's how you can find me.